Hello, in this video we'll be looking at Egenes lesson 14 at the grammar and then the vocabulary that's on pages 182 to 191 of the printed volume. The lesson starts with a recap of the Sandhi rules for words ending in visarga, the subdotted H. I think all of the rules have been looked at. This just summarizes them. So we start with words ending in a short a. Very, very common. Followed, oops, I'm writing on my iPad here. There we are, short a. Rule, very simple. If the following word begins with an a, then what happens is the first word begins in o and the a drops. So, he is a Buddha, or the Buddha is. So, Buddha asti becomes buddhosti. And this dropped a that is typically represented by an apostrophe in the Roman script is represented in Devanagari script by this symbol called the avagraha, literally taking out, avagraha, off grabbing, taking out, representing the missing a. So Ramutra, Ramutra, what's this representing the missing a? Ramutra, Rama there. Now any other vowel ending in a short a plus any other vowel apart from a short a, the rule is very simple. All that happens is the visarga drops. So Rama agacchati, Rama is coming. Rama agacchati. So it's the second word begins with a vowel other than a short a. All that happens, visarga drops. There you are. That's the rule. And it leaves a vowel hiatus, Rama agacchati. And as I think you all know by now, you never apply sandhi twice. Therefore, that vowel hiatus is left in place, Rama agacchati. And these are written always as two separate words in Devanagari. Rama, new word, and you get the full vowel symbol, agacchati. Do not apply sandhi now in between these two words because the sandhi has already been applied there. And remember, write the second word with its full vowel symbol. If it starts with the vowel Rama, agacchati. Write it with its full a. Now we look at words ending in a long a plus a following vowel. As simple as can be, all that happens is the visarga drops, whatever the following vowels. So the men are coming, would be narah without sandhi, narah agachanti. What happens? The visarga drops, so it just becomes narah agachanti. Narah iti becomes narah iti. Now we look at a separate set of rules that applies where it's any, or you get visarga preceded by any vowel other than a or a. We can look for it. We're going to look at these examples. Muni means a sage, bhikshu, a bhikshu, a monk. And we have other vowels as well. For example, of the two rivers. The river is nadi, and the genitive dual of the two rivers is nadyo. This set of rules, this is visarga preceded by any vowel apart from short a or long a, applies to all other vowels, long or short, I, U, E, U, O, E, and so on. The same rules apply to them all. If any of these are followed by a vowel, the visarga changes into a r. Simple as that. The sage is coming. Muniragachati. The bhikkhu is coming. The bhikshu. Sorry, I need to write in Sanskrit, not Pali. Bhikshuragachati. Of the two rivers, there. Of the two rivers. Nadyuratra. So it's just the visarga changing to a ra before the following vowel. The same rule applies with, so we'll stick to, at the moment, though it's not the order, I appreciate it's following an Egenes grammar here, we will continue to look at visarga preceded by any vowel other than a or a, so these same munih, bhikshu, nadyo. If a visarga is followed by a voiced consonant, then equally it will become a ra. So for these purposes, the muni, bhikshu, nadyo, of the muni would be mune. That's the genitive of muni, mune. All of these visarga preceded by a vowel other than a or a. The same rule applies with voice consonants as applies before a preceding vowel. So the sage's vihara, the vihara of the sage, mune, it would be muner vihara. The bhikkhu's meditation practice, for example, the bhavana, just as the genitive of muni is mune, so the genitive of bhikshu is bhikshu. So the bhikshu's practice would be bhikshur bhavana. And again, remember in the spelling in the Devanagari script, they tend to get joined together, don't they? So, mu, ne. Now we've got rvi coming, so we put this bar of the v, rvi. Sorry, I didn't write that very well. This is just meant to be that hook. the hook for the r. So, sorry, I'm mucking this up trying to write on an iPad. So that's meant to be Muner Vihara. I haven't written it very well. I'll try and write it again better. Muner Vihara. Muner Vihara. So this group here is Rvi. Remember, Rvi is written like this. Rvi, as in Muner Vihara. It comes together in one cluster, though it belongs to two separate words. Now, this rule about the visarga becoming r before a voiced consonant, there is one exception, and that is if the second consonant, the consonant beginning the next word, is itself a r. You can never have a double r in Sanskrit. Same applies in Pali. You cannot have a double r. So, what happens is that the r, if it's a long vowel, nadur. So let's say the Muni's rupa, okay, statue. That would be Mune rupa, rupam, Sanushanam. Mune rupam, right. Normally, before a voiced consonant, mune would become r. But that would lead to a double r, muner rupam, which is not allowed. So all that happens is they both drop out. So it's just mune rupam. Now, let's take a sentence like the Muni sees the rupa. Muni rupam pashyati. Muni rupam pashyati. Now, this visarga wants to change to a r before a voiced consonant, but the voiced consonant is itself a r, can't have a double r. What happens? You drop the r, but you compensate by lengthening the preceding vowel. So muni rupam, so on. Muni rupam. So if you see a muni rupam, you know that that is the lengthening of the e to compensate for the dropped visarga and the dropped r that the visarga wants to become but can't because it's a following r. Now we will look at what happens to sorry, before a voiced consonant. I'm looking now at the top of page 185. This one we know very well. Rama gachati. Rama is going. What happens? The ah becomes o. Ramu gachati. And the same would apply whatever be the voiced consonant following. If it's long ah, voiced consonant, what happens? It drops the visarga. So the men are going. Nara gachanti, drop the visarga because of the voiced consonant. Nara gachanti. And I've just dealt with the rule where there is, we'd looked at ah and ah followed by voice consonants. I've just kind of out of turn, as it were, for not following the order of the book, told you what happens with any vowel other than a or ah with visarga, followed by a voice consonant. It behaves in the same way as if the next letter begins with a vowel, namely, it changes to a r. Now look at the rules where a word ending in a visarga preceded by any vowel at all is followed by an unvoiced consonant. That is the k, ch, da, ta, pa, sha, and sa. Or if it's the end of a line. So if the word is just on its own, nothing follows, end of line. On its own, naraha, the man, naraha. If the following word begins with a ka or ka or pa or pa, or or any of the three sibilants, then it remains as a visarga. Narah khadati, the man eats. The Buddha sees. Buddha pashyati. Buddha pashyati. The Muni's fruits. Genitive mune. Palani. Sorry, palani, that's meant to be. If the following consonant is a dental, like ta or ta, then the visarga changes to a sa. Rama there. Rama tatra changes Ramas tatra. So it changes to the same point of articulation, sta. If you say and Rama, Ramahcha, that becomes Ramashcha. So it changes to a sibilant, but with a sh. Same point of articulation, shcha, both palatals. So I'm to say now Rama and followed by tika. Sorry. Rama tika. The same rule applies mutatis mutandis. The visarga is replaced by a sibilant, but a sibilant pronounced from the same point of articulation. The d is retroflex, so the sibilant sh also becomes retroflex. So that would become Ramashtika. And you write it in Devanagari like that. Ramashtika. Ramashtika. Note that the sh plus d is written like that. You see they kind of squashed into each other. Shta. And you see halfway down page 187 what happens to these words in the Devanagari script. You see the shcha and the shcha, shta, shta, and sta and sta. And as I mentioned before, if you look at paragraph 4 at the bottom of page 187, you just see the visarga remaining unchanged before ka, ka, or pa, pa. Rama kutra remains as Rama kutra. We now go over to page 188. And sorry, and as I've said before, I'll go back a moment. As I've said before, um, don't stress and strain too much over learning these rules by heart. Just take them in passively in slightly soft focus, and they will merge into. I mean, it took me quite a lot of time to master the whole thing until it became second nature to me. But it will come. Just the main thing is remember to recognize it when you see it, rather than be able to produce it actively in your heads, and always keep a note of where to go back to it to find the rule. Incidentally, if you want to have a summary of the rules, there's a very good concise summary given in MacDonnell's Sanskrit Grammar for Students. Sorry, I paused. I've slightly lost track. I just mentioned MacDonnell's Sanskrit Grammar with his section on the rules of Sandhi, and that is chapter 2, starting at page 10. I know it's 22 pages or so of rules, but they're very conveniently laid out and divided quite fairly clearly into subheadings, and you'll find anything fairly easy to find there. So I do urge you to try and get hold of MacDonnell's Sanskrit Grammar, or at least have it online, and know easily how to go and look things up there, because it is all very concisely explained. Now we look at verb prefixes, starting at page 188. The treatment of the verb prefixes given in Egenes is actually quite sketchy. It's not wrong, but it's quite sketchy. There are the rules given here, and I think there are rules given a lesson or two on as to what the various prefixes mean. As those of you who've been with me in the lessons I've given, both the Zoom lessons and our live lessons online, there's an enormous amount of subtlety to these prefixes. And in fact, it's the subtlety of prefixes followed by the verbal root, typically verbal root, that give a lot of subtlety and profundity to the imagery of Sanskrit and Pali. How you get really profound concepts being conveyed by very simple common roots, preceded by 1, 2, 3. I think 3 is the maximum prefixes. And it's best learnt just by repetition, seeing them, just considering what they all mean. Some of them are pretty simple, others are more complex. For example, in the top half of page 188, there's a discussion, very brief discussion, of the prefix prati. But prati, in fact, has a lot of profundity and subtlety to it. It's not just back to or again, it's a counter, it's kind of in relation to, one against the other, in opposition to, in counterbalance to, also respect of. It's kind of a relationship prefix that we have in a bit of Pali here. The Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, well proclaimed by the Blessed One, is the Dharma in Sanskrit. The Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo is Swakyato Bhagavata Dharma, not that different from Pali. And we get in Pali to be known for oneself by the wise. Pachattam veditabbu vinyuhihi. Pachattam, which in Sanskrit would be pratyatman, Atman oneself, pratyatman, each for himself. In other words, you've got to know it by yourself and for yourself. It's not something that somebody gives you. You've got something to know, and it's by yourself and for yourself that you are knowing. It's pratyatman, by yourself. Some of the prefixes are simpler, like upa, which is cognate with our English word up. So it means that towards or near, like you go up to somebody, you're being horizontally, but you'll be going up to him. You are approaching him. So gacchati goes upagacchati, goes towards. Prati gacchati, the prati here in the meaning of back or against. Prati gacchati, goes back to or returns to. We have already seen several times the prefix a, normally meaning on or towards. Also can indicate kind of aggression, one thing on top of another, on. It, in verbs of motion or deemed motion, it reverses the motion. So gacchati goes, agacchati comes. From da, to give, ada, to take. Harati, he takes. Aharati, he brings. So in those few verbs, it so to speak, reverses the motion of the verb take, bring, give, take, go, come. And normally it means kind of towards or onto. We now look at the imperfect tense. We see that halfway down page 188. You'll see the imperfect. I'm reading from paragraph 3, halfway down page 188 here. The imperfect, and then in brackets you'll see the word lang. What does lang mean? It's one of these numerous algebraic, formulaic words invented by Panini as an abbreviation for a particular rule or for an abbreviated set of endings. So when you see, if ever you do see lang in a work of Sanskrit grammar, that simply means the imperfect form of the verb, including all the endings, the imperfect form of the verb with all its endings. A note on the meaning of imperfect. Those of you who are familiar with Latin and the Romance languages, including Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian. I think Romanian is included in the ones who treat the imperfect in this way. The imperfect means an action that has not been completed, which is the meaning of imperfect, non-completed. Means it's an action that was going on for some time in the past. That's what it means in Latin, and that's what it means in Italian, French, Spanish, and so on. The name imperfect stuck on Sanskrit only because the first people who wrote about Sanskrit, first Europeans, I should say, who wrote about Sanskrit and wrote Sanskrit grammars for the use of speakers of European languages, were people who were steeped in classical knowledge, the classical knowledge of Latin and Greek. And they looked, and particularly Sir William Jones, I think, put the name imperfect on it. And so they looked at the Sanskrit and said, this form of the verb is rather the same in form as the Greek and the Latin imperfect, so we'll call it the imperfect. Okay, so far so good, save that in Sanskrit the imperfect does not have the same meaning as imperfect in Latin. It does actually refer to a completed action, but a completed action more in the remote past. An aorist is often used for the nearer past, and imperfect is actually a completed action, at some time in the remote past, and typically one where the speaker had not himself seen the action. These are refined difficulties, which past means exactly what. You've got the reduplicated perfect, you've got the imperfect, you've got the aorist. In classical Sanskrit, the difficulties have been pretty much smudged out. So you can just treat the agachat, the imperfect, as a general past tense. So how is the imperfect formed? Well, you take the present stem, although it's imperfect, it's formed from the present stem, so that means it belongs to what's known as the present system. So the present system is the present, the imperfect, the optative, and the imperative. And it's called the present system because it follows the classes of the verbs, classes 1 to 10. So what do you do? It's helpfully laid out on page 189 of Egenes grammar. At the bottom of the page, you've got the conjugation of the simple verb that we know in the present tense, gacchati, gacchasi, gacchami, and so on, all 9 forms of it, and that makes it very easy to compare with the imperfect. First thing you'll notice is that the imperfect is preceded by the letter a, and that's known as the augment, the imperfect augment. Now look at the endings of those verbs. You'll see they're mostly close to the endings of the present tense, but they're shortened. So present tense, for example, gacchami, imperfect agacham. Second singular gacchasi, but second singular imperfect agachaha. So instead of ending in asi, in fact, it originally ended in as, and that as just became ah by Santi. And then gacchati, agachat, so just ending the t with the e dropped. The endings for the dual we and dual you forms, the third person dual and second person dual, a bit different. So you two go, gacchata, with an aspirated T, and they two go, gacchataha, with an unaspirated T. Look up to the imperfect, and the corresponding ones are agachatam, you two go, and agachatam, they two go. So the agachatam depart from the pattern that the imperfect endings closely follow the present ones. If you look at the first person dual, that this correspondence does apply. It is a shortened form, gachavaha. Look down at the very bottom line, middle word at the bottom of page 189. Gachavaha, we two are going. Look at the corresponding place in the imperfect, gachava. So it's the same ending ava, but with no visarga on the end. And the same applies exactly to gachama, we are going, and gachamaha with the visarga, and we went agachama without the visarga. They go, plural, gachanti. What happens in the imperfect? The T drops off. You have the augment, but the T drops off. Agachan, they went. And second plural, you plural, went. In the present tense, you go gachata with the aspirated ta, but in the imperfect, it's the non-aspirated. It's agachata, agachata. So those of you who want to learn it all by heart, do by all means. Otherwise, just take it in passively as you go along. Probably the ones that you'll come across most frequently are the third singular and third plural. Learn those now. Agachat, he went. Agachan, they plural went. Now we're going to see what happens when the augment, that's this a that gets put on the beginning of the verb for the imperfect, when the augment, when a verb root takes both a prefix and an augment. The augment always goes immediately in front of the root. So gam agachat. If you want to have a verbal prefix like prati or upa, the augment remains stuck to the root. So you get the prefix, let's say the top example on page 190, prefix, let's say prati, augment a, and then the root of the verb, or the conjugational stem of the verb, I should say, in that order. So prati agachat, he returned. Prati agachat, which then by sandhi becomes pratyagachat. Sandhi applies as normal here. Pratya, pratyagachat. And the next example given is he approached, is upa agachat. So agachat, he went. Upa agachat, he went up to, he approached. By sandhi, the upa plus the a becomes upa. So upagachat, he approached. Upagachat. And the third example on page 190 is the verbal prefix, the upasarga a. So here what have we got? We've got the prefix a, we've got the augment a. So I came, agacham, with the prefix a, sandhi applies in the normal way. So just agacham. You can say agacham. They merge together by the normal rules of sandhi. So agacham. Now we look at the vocabulary on page 191, but before doing that, just look at this last little rule in paragraph 7 on page 190. Often a prefix may affect whether a verb takes an active or middle endings, that's the parasmaipada or the atmanepada endings. We've got a couple of examples here, for example, ni, to lead, is ubhayapada. So parasmaipada, word for another, that's active transitive. Atmanepada, word for oneself, that's the middle endings, the different t and te. Ubhaya means both. Ubhayapada, it's both forms of word. So if you look at this ni leads, it can be nayati or nayate. And G, with short E, G, to conquer, can be jayati or jayate. But with upa, with a, look at the first word in the vocabulary list on page 191. Ni, to bring, where the a here has the towards meaning, to lead towards, so to bring. Without a prefix, ni, nayati or nayate, with the prefix a, it's always the parasmaipada, aniyati. Just learn those bit by bit as you go along. If your main concern is reading, as for all of us, of course, it's going to be reading rather than writing. It's not terribly important to remember which is which, because you'll just recognize, you'll see nayati, nayate, okay. If you can't remember whether it's anayati or anayate, remember anayate doesn't in fact exist, doesn't matter too much, because when you're reading it, you'll see anayati, you know what it means, anayati, he brings. So looking at the vocabulary then, this root ni, long E, ni, see, ani, It's a class 1, and as with many class 1 verbs, it makes a guna of the vowel I, so ne plus ati. Now, by internal sandhi, whenever you get e plus a, it always becomes nayati. And that accounts for ni with guna ne, but followed by a vowel in the same word. Remember, this is internal sandhi. Ne ati is always nayati. Just as ji, the guna je, and the non-existent form je ati becomes automatically by internal sandhi jayati. In fact, it's jayati or jayate, and both forms exist. Okay, next word in the vocabulary list, upagam, upagacchati. Remember, gam, a bit irregular, not gamati, but gacchati, and the same rule applies with any prefix that it has, agacchati, upagacchati, vigacchati, avagacchati, and so on. Gup is actually a class 10 verb with the ayati, not ati, but ayati ending. Again, guna applies, so the root is gup. Apply guna, go payati, to protect. And ni, nayati, nayate, we've just seen. Root pa, it's a little bit irregular because it makes its present stem in piba. So pibati. You see that in the Latin, bibere. But the root is pa, and that is from this root pa that you get patra, meaning a bowl, but originally patra, pa to drink, patra, something you drink with, a tool for drinking. And you get the future passive participle with the nia, pania, pania, that which can be drunk. So water, but specifically drinkable water. That's when we get in modern northern Indian languages, including Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi. We have just pani, meaning water, from that same root pa, to drink. The next one, pratigam, pratigacchati. This is another example of our prati that we discussed a little earlier, to come back, return. From the root bud. Bud has this kind of dual meaning, both to be awake and to know. So bud, and in the sense of knowing, it's against a class 1 verb. So it takes its guna of the u to o, bodhati or bodhate. You can have either. So it's ubhayapada. And the root has, meaning to laugh, hasati. With verbs with an I or an U in the root, they typically will take a guna in their present stem if they're class 1. That's why bud, bodhati, jayati. If the vowel is a short a, the guna form of a is a, unchanged. There's a vriddhi form a, but just the guna is a, so it remains as it is. So you see a, sometimes the a is its own guna. The guna of I is e, the guna of u is o, but a is its own guna, so it doesn't change. Hasati. And that's one that survives, for example, in modern Hindi as in the root hasna, with a nasalized hasna. Right, so this repeats the rule towards the bottom of the page that we've got the gerundive or the absolutive, let's call it the absolutive ending toi. If there's a prefix on the verb, it's not toi, but ya. Remember that rule is hardly applied in Pali, and you can just toi and ya are used more or less interchangeably, but in Sanskrit the rule is fairly strictly applied. Bear root, take toi. Verbal prefix plus root, add ya. And that concludes the grammar and vocabulary for lesson 14, and the next video I'll deal with the exercises starting at page 192.